Well, good morning. Good morning. We are positively delighted that all of you are here this morning to join us for the August Experts for Entrepreneurial program. And this is a highlight. I don't know about you guys, but this is absolutely a highlight of my month. Unfortunately, through the pandemic, we spend a lot of hours at our homes and somewhat isolated. So the opportunity to get on a Zoom and praise God for Zoom that it's our media for being able to stay connected. But I love the thought of my day starting with being in front of people and being able to talk with them, even though it is a virtual platform. I'll take it because that's what we have today. So I can't tell you how much we are pleased that you have joined us today. For our partners and our subscribers, we so appreciate your commitment, your continued commitment to E4E for coming, because all of us behind the scenes work really hard to bring this programming to each and every one of you each month. So thank you for showing up, because it really wouldn't be that satisfying if we didn't have an audience out there. And for those of you that are guests, if this is your first time, we are super excited to have you. We're so glad you found out about the E4E community, and we're hoping that going forward you will make this a part of your monthly schedule. So just a couple of housekeeping for those of us like myself that are still kind of getting my Zoom skills up. We have two Zoom functions down at the bottom of your screen so that you do have the opportunity to communicate a little bit with us throughout the program. If you just kind of hover your cursor down at the bottom, you'll see that there's an icon at the bottom that says Q&A, and there's one that says chat. And you can help out Will, who's running our webinar, a little bit if you have a question for one of our presenters today. If you'll type in that using that icon, that'll try to help him quickly find the questions for our presenters. But if you have a comment or an aha moment throughout the program, you can also just type in that feature where it says chat, what you're thinking, your takeaway for the day. And I'll give you a little heads up that our fearless leader, Bill Purnett, at the end, when he comes on, he's going to ask, for some feedback about what you're taking away from today's meeting, the value you've had in it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's look at our agenda. I think Will has it up on the screen for us, and I'll just quickly run it down for you before we actually dive into the program. After I finish my spiel here, we're gonna start with our marketing spotlight, and Andy Magnus will give us some of his wisdom around marketing. Followed by, after Andy, will be our first run showcase. We will have the tag team of Bill Higley and Caesar Keller, who are going to talk with us about, are we missing potential customers? And wow, that sounds like an exciting topic to me. And there's a little verbiage below that to kind of if you haven't had the opportunity to look at our agenda before, you could quickly read that before we take it down. Next up will be the Grow Showcase. And we're talking about run your business, grow your business. For those of you who are guests, that's kind of what our category of our programming are. And so our Grow Showcase will be being brought to us by the one and only Thad James. And then our Live, which gives us some pointers about not only how to live a quality life while we're growing and running our businesses. And that will be headed up by Ann Purnett, along with her panel of experts, Lori St. Clair, Will Hankey, and Richard Terry. And then to bring it all home, like I let you know that, Bill's gonna be coming on, our leader, and talk about, highlighting some of our takeaways. That's your part in the program, either through Q&A. And then Dale Furtwängler will give us a sneak preview for next month's meeting. And I'll have some quick closing comments, and you'll be on your way to continue the rest of your day. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to the one and only Andy Magnus. Andy's
Andy,
on mute.
mute.
Minor details. Okay, welcome everybody. Glad you all are here. And we're going to talk a little bit about today in marketing. Of course, what we're trying to do is communicate. And I'm Andy Magnus. I'm CPA, former IRS agent, and speaker, author, and humorist. And so today we're going to talk about communication, whether that's information we're trying to communicate or we're going to influence. Of course, the goal of marketing is to convey our message to other people about our product or service, and with the intention of doing business with them. And that's going to be the important thing, getting our message to them. And there's ways of doing it, and some are better than others. So to communicate, we're kind of trying to convey knowledge, information, or a message. And, you know, communication is only part of it. The words are only part of it. Today, we're going to talk mostly about one-way communication, but this really applies to communication to a few and a communication to many. I think that Thad's going to talk a little bit about that in his segment also. So communication is something we take for granted very frequently, but in order to be effective, it really has to be very intentional communication. Casual communication, of course, there's a time and a place for all that, but you know, when we get into a business situation, we're trying to make our connection with our people and intentionally communicate with them, not just spewing information. We've been in parties and at networking event where somebody's there throwing up on us, and it starts sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. And so that's not really what we're trying to do. So communication is not just talking to yourself. There's a diagnosis for that, but we won't get into that today. We have a sender and a receiver, and then sometimes it goes back the other way. So we have two terminals involved, and again, the receiver, the goal is for the receiver to understand and duplicate what the sender is saying. So that's why we have two ears and one mouth. We've often got in situations where we've tried to communicate with people and the message didn't get across like we thought, especially when we're doing it in writing alone. Our friend and Alan Greenspan, I think, said it nicely. Says, I know you think you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. Have you ever tried to communicate with people like that? Yeah, I think we've all been there. So again, we communicate with people in a number of ways, but primarily we do written and then the not written. So in the written, we only get the reaction of words, and words, as we all know, can be very misinterpreted because we're missing a great part of our communication process. So there are times when written is appropriate, but there are other times when we're trying to be impactful or influence that we really can do better by using non-written communication. We use our words, of course, but then we can use pictures, and then we have our non-verbal communication. We have our body language, we have our volume, we have tone and tempo. So again, these are all adding into part of the communication. The words are just a small part of the total communication process. Let's take an example of that for just a minute, and we'll just read the screen. And when you see the word, it can mean a number of things, but when you add the other non-verbal communications, it can just say no, or it can be no, or no, and no. They're all saying the same word, but they're conveying very different messages. That's the importance of using the nonverbal as a part of your communication with people that you're trying to do. So when we're writing, you know, we need to know when we're communicating, we need to know who are we communicating and what are we communicating about. if we're intentional about our communication, we need to say, okay, are we trying to get them information, or are we trying to influence or impact the other person? Because that makes a difference on how you communicate with them. Written is very good when you have information. It's less likely, although can be misinterpreted, just if you're doing information. However, if you're trying to influence or impact, then you use words, you use other means of conveying a message. And again, Thad I'm expecting we'll cover some of that in just a little bit. So written information can be gotten out in letters, in emails, text, instant messages. It seems like certain generationals like to use the written more than they do the communication. I know my kids, trying to get in touch with them by anything other than text message is almost impossible. But for me, if you need something, let's talk about it. The higher level of connection, the influence or the impact is done on the phone, of course, in video conferencing, like we're doing here, in personal meetings. You remember personal meetings, right? It's a vague, distant past. Yeah, that one day we'll get back to that. Video messaging is another way of connecting well with people. Another way to impact, though, is the handwritten note, in that, that much better than an email. If you've gotten a handwritten note recently, there's just that warm, fuzzy feeling that kind of comes with that. So that's another way you can impact rather than just trying to, just do it on all electronically. So we have to ask ourselves, when we're communicating, what is really the desired outcome of what we're doing? Are we trying to get information over to people, or are we trying to impact or influence them? If we're doing information, written is great, but let's be intentional with our information. And by all means, reread it before you send it. I don't know about you, but I've gone back and reread some of my messages, and they just don't say the same thing that I thought they said when I sent them the first time, or there's words missing or things like that. But if you're trying to really impact or influence somebody, use other forms of communication. Make sure you're being intentional with what you're communicating with other people. So I want to challenge you today is to start paying attention to what you're communicating, as well as how you're communicating with people, both online and offline. So go do that, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Really great reminders in your presentation, things that I've heard before, but it's a really good idea. I love the idea about being intentional too. I think sometimes we forget about, it really does work much better if we're intentional about our messaging and really what we're trying to accomplish. So very, very interesting insight and reminders. Thank you. So next up, out of the gate, we're gonna start with our run showcase, which tips and information that will help us, be more effectively in running our business. And our presenters today are Bill Higley and Caesar Keller. So guys, I'm turning it over to you.
So good morning, everybody. I'm getting my slideshow here, ready to go. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to actually present this with Bill Higley. I'll start by saying that, several months back, Bill approached me saying, hey, wouldn't it be nice to kind of co-present on something? And we're always thinking about how can we combine the lives of our careers of systems and development online, along with legal. So today we just wanted to bring you some awareness regarding web accessibility and what that means for small businesses, what that means for everybody. Bill, I don't know if you had any intro words, but what we're going to do is I'm going to start off and then I'm going to hand off the presentation over to Bill. So any intro words from you, Bill?
That's going to work fine, and it'll dovetail nicely. Thank you.
Perfect. So
I will say this, that I do need to add this, that Caesar really took the laboring oar in putting together the beautiful graphics for this presentation. I'm a wordsmith, and pictures are worth 1,000 words, and he's the man.
Appreciate that,
So
Bill.
take it
Thank you
away.
very much. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is, so why care about web accessibility? Starting with the why always makes a lot of sense, right? Well, it should be a real, effective, and stable solution, not only for businesses, but all, including people with disabilities. So this is almost like a fairness or equality situation that we have going on. Technology is great, only if it works. And if it only works for certain people, there's a little disequilibrium that we need to think about. So here is just something to think about, right? Visualize your life without internet. It's pretty difficult, right? You know, there's been some major, major revolutionary changes as to how we do business, how we communicate, how we digest information. But just think about that for a second. That's a very impactful statement, right? Think about closing your eyes and going, I have to live life without being able to see. Or if you have some impairments and disabilities, technology is already complicated as it is. It's getting better and better. But a lot of us have to learn and get on that learning train of always learning technology and keeping up. Well, imagine if you couldn't even keep up, because it's kind of unfair and it's stacked against you. And that's what we're going to try to talk about today. So there's various disability categories when you start talking about compliance solutions. And today we're specifically talking about web accessibility. So when you access the web and you're trying to do things online, what are the types of impairments that a lot of people are unaware of? So we're not going to cover all of them today, but I listed some there. You know, blindness, motor disorders, cognitive disorders, color blindness. Um, People immediately go to fully blind, but there's various issues with eyesight and macular degeneration and other diseases where you can have severe partial blindness. So you can see a little bit, but not enough to kind of render things clearly. And that, just the interaction with computers and screens and prompts and everything, that complicates things for people. Epilepsy is one that a lot of people don't think about, like any flashing screen or switching of graphics or certain colors, especially with screens that the hertz that vibrate, some of these things can cause seizures. Imagine having situations where you're very, very limited screen exposure because you know, it might trigger a seizure. So again, I'm going to cover some examples of these just to kind of bring awareness to everybody and start those discussions. So the first one is blind and visually impaired, right? This was probably the most recognized in this field. It is difficult to cope with displays. You typically need to increase the media size, the text, or the reading and browsing experience. Typical systems and software that are out and about, even hardware devices, there's a lot of speech recognition software out there that can help. There's Braille keyboards. Sometimes there's other input devices other than a mouse and trackpads, which is the common. There's head tracking, and some now that are coming up with a whole bunch of eyeglasses that have eyeline movement, and you can actually click by blinking and stuff like that, some of the more advanced stuff. And that's for obviously people that are visually impaired. People that are fully blind, imagine trying to navigate systems without being able to see. That software and those keyboards and those systems of dictation need to have extra coding, extra scripts, extra things that communicate with your system, and have to be done in a very specific way to work. So if you haven't prepared your systems, these people are going to have a lot of trouble. One note to think about is obviously partial vision loss is something to think about. Immediately people think about just being fully blind, but that's not the only case. The next example is motor disabled. There's a lot of people that deal with limited movement or being able to operate fully with articulations and functions, hands and legs and whatnot. There are diseases such as Parkinson's, there's bone injuries, organ injuries, palsy, even people that have you know, limb amputations. So they don't have hands or arms to be able to manipulate certain devices. So there's a lot of devices that are being programmed and executed as far as hardware and software to help people with these particular disabilities. But imagine not even being able to use a keyboard or a mouse. That's pretty trivial, right? That's very difficult to do. So extremely customizable and flexible tools and systems are needed for this particular group. Again, I kind of highlighted epilepsy. A lot of people don't think about epilepsy as being an issue, but imagine if any flashing or refreshing screens can trigger a seizure. Imagine if you've prepared a ton of amazing content online, but it's all video or something to that effect, and certain people could not render or watch videos because they trigger seizures. They'd prefer more of the traditional reading and scripts and something that is not so animated. Just something to consider as far as how to provide alternate content for several subgroups. So there was an online study that was performed, and they basically did research across 10 million web pages to just start thinking about the average out there of who is compliant and who is not compliant when it comes to web accessibility. And right here, we have a little chart of the percentage of web pages that failed based on certain categories. So I'm not going to go into the details of every single category, nor the how you fix it technically, but at least I'll talk a little bit about some examples of why some of these categories are failing and how simple it is to fix some of these things. So for the number one is menus. Every single website out there or system has to have a menu so you can navigate the system. And imagine if that website would not work unless you did the traditional click on the menus. And that's where the problems start. The example here is, remember how I talked about these specialized keyboards and these specialized software things? If you can't navigate the website through just entering keys or right and left arrows, there's certain scripts that you can write to do that. None of those additional assistive technologies work. So people that have these disabilities can't even navigate your website. Images, it's a little bit better, 52% tend to fail. The thing here is that there's tags that you can put along with images, because if you're blind or you have visual impairments and you can't see graphics, or you're colorblind and colors mess up the representation of the data, usually you can have either alternative content or alternative tags that give you a description, almost like metadata. You can't see this banner, you can't see this image, but let us describe what this image is in text format. And that's where those speech readers can read out, this is what this image is, this is what constitutes the message or information inside of that graphic. Pop-ups. We all hate pop-ups, whether we're disabled or not, but imagine not being able to close a pop-up because you can't hit the escape key because you can't navigate with a mouse or a trackpad to close that pop-up down. That's a simple script that can be written, but imagine how annoying it is that the second that the pop-up comes up, all your systems fail because they did not program a keyboard shortcut to be able to close that pop-up. Forms. Going through a lot of forms and filling out information can be very tedious, even for regular people. And there's a lot of form validation. So, oh, you put in the wrong data inside of this field. It's got to be correct before you move to the next step. Well, when you see the prompts and you can navigate the forms normally, not that big of an issue. But what if you can't see? What if you can't click on certain things? What if the speech recognition software cannot tell you what the problem or what field it is that is failing before you can submit that form? It brings everything to a halt. So those are just some examples that I wanted to share. Again, not in a technical format, but a lot of these problems are quite easily fixed by just understanding the scripting and the programming technologies behind those. It's just a lot of times that's considered extra. And when we're building websites or we're building online systems, we make the decision of, well, let's save a little bit of money there, let's save a little bit here, it's going to be a little bit less expensive, but that choice limits people using your system. So just something to think about, to be aware. And by the way, across the 10 million pages, this study, 85% of those websites were based on the United States and Canada. There were also Europe studies and whatnot, but just to share, these statistics hit close to home. And now is where I want to just turn it over to Bill. We're going to kind of move from the technical side that I just described and the whys of why we care a little bit more into understanding the impact of compliance guidelines and the legal aspects. So Bill, happy to pass that over to you, and just let me know when you want me to advance to the next slide.
Thank you, Caesar. Thank you very much. And if you don't mind, I'll just ask you to advance to the next slide. That way I don't have to switch over to sharing my screen. We both have the same presentation on our screens at our desks, but if you'll advance to the next slide whenever I'm finished, that'll make for a better continuity of the program. But thank you very much. So building off what Caesar said, a couple of preliminaries. Andy had a question about statistics about the number of disabled users and the prevalence of disabled users and how widespread this problem is. So this group here that promulgates the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines can tell you that. It is a consortium of industry developers and others interested in developing these accessibility and systems for disabled users. So you can access the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines at a website. It's w3.com. And if you go there, you'll find the W3C, which is called the consortium. It studies the issues and makes recommendations and guidelines for developers. So this is somewhat like the ISO 9000 certification in industry and in manufacturing. So if you consider an analogy here, to ISO 9000, ISO 9000 is based on core principles of management and data management and systems. Similarly, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are based on 4 core principles. And these are that the information must be perceivable by the disabled user. The user interface components and navigation must be operable. So Caesar talked about navigation devices, about alternate input devices. They must be operable. Perhaps that's through auditory connections and resources. Perhaps that's through motor navigation modifications, but they must be operable. The user must be able to operate the interface. Thirdly, the information and the operation of the interface must be understandable. If they can't comprehend it, and perhaps they can't comprehend it because they can't see it, that perhaps they can't comprehend it because they can't get to a particular place on a web page, on a screen, on a live button or a live link to understand it. And so that gets to issues of nomenclature, taxonomy, terminology. How many of us have gone off on research and tried to do research, but we can't figure out what was in the indexer's mind to begin with. And so the person who wrote the index used terminology that we didn't think of. And so that's where you get into the issue of understandable. And finally, the content must be robust enough to be interpreted by a wide range of assistive technologies. So there are lots of assistive technologies out there, but if your content only connects with a portion of them, then you leave out a wide range of users who use other assistive technologies, whether it's auditory or visual or motor-based input devices. So Caesar, if we can go to the next slide, we're going to look at 2 examples here, the Domino's Pizza case and the 20th Century Fox case. So the in Domino's Pizza, we have a blind customer who sued under the Americans with Disabilities Act, alleging that their mobile app and website don't work with that user's assistive software. We're not told what the assistive software was. We don't know what that was. That's not in the report of the case. But the cause of action was brought under the ADA. There were other parts of the lawsuit which really don't pertain to our discussion here. But if you think of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there are regulations promulgated under that act by the Department of Justice. So there's an analogy here. The analogy on the one hand is the relationship between OSHA and ISO 9000. On the other hand, we have here the ADA and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So in each case, There is a legal framework which applies to a limited subset of examples, but then there's an industry consortium which casts a very broad net and applies to a wide variety. So the ADA here applies. The highlights of this case are that the ADA applies to what are called places of public accommodation. So there are two elements to that. Number one is a place. The word place is important here. And second, public accommodation. So in this case, the court held that the Domino's app and the website are intended to connect customers and potential customers to the place at which goods and services are sold, in this case, pizza and food, so that the prospective customer cannot access or purchase food except by going to the place or by relationship to a place. So to the extent that the mobile app and the website connect customers to the place at which goods or services are offered, then the ADA applies. So the ADA requires the use of auxiliary aids and services to allow, from the regulations, full and equal enjoyment of goods and services by disabled customers. So in the example of buildings and places, we see those all the time. Those are railings, doorways for restrooms, signage, braille signage, lots of other examples of auxiliary aids and services. That's what all those things are called, to allow full and equal enjoyment of what is offered at that place or in connection with that place by disabled customers. So in this case, Domino's was faced with a task of addressing its mobile app and its website. So the next slide shows a contrasting case. So in this case, the 20th Century Fox Film Corporation, an employee sues the employer alleging that employer-provided insurance discriminated against disabled employees. Something about the employer-provided insurance was alleged to be discriminatory. And again, in this case, we're not told what the features of that insurance were. We're not told in what way it discriminated against employees. However, the court in that case held, by contrast, that employer-provided insurance is not connected either to the physical office of the employer or the insurance company. In other words, the employee did not have to avail themselves or access the physical location of 20th Century Fox in order to avail themselves of this benefit. So the case shows the distinction between application to places of public accommodation. So in this case, no connection to a physical space. Now, granted, 20th Century Fox does indeed solicit the public, but the lawsuit here was not brought by a member of the public. The lawsuit was brought by an employee of 20th Century Fox who is not a member of the public. So the distinction then is access to physical places by members of the public. Now, the next slide shows an example of an entire industry, and I cite the gaming industry here. Caesar and I looked over this industry, because these are very obvious examples, very illustrative examples of vendors and businesses who are most certainly soliciting the public for sales of goods and services. But in the gaming industry, there's no access required to a place. It is totally over the web. And the other aspect of the gaming industry is that the user experience is itself the product. It is not a product for sale. So in the case of Domino's, the user experience with the app and the website are not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to buy food and pizza and to get the customer to buy food and pizza. In the gaming industry, the point of the exercise is the participant, the gamer's experience with the website and with what is on the screen. So even though there is no applicability of the Americans with Disabilities Act, this industry provides an example how they have gone well beyond what the legal requirements are by way of providing additional, these are primarily input devices, head tracking systems, adaptive controllers for Xbox, that's for a specialized game, access controllers. There are all sorts of other assistive controllers that enable participants with limited hand motion to input. These are like joysticks with multiple controls. They look like musical instruments almost. So that those are primarily input devices. Then the output from the computer will come in the form of voice or conversion of visual to audio and other similar types of signals, beeps, audio signals, other things that permit tracking of elements on the screen interface. So that in this situation, we can go to the next slide, Caesar. So if I am if I have a business, then of course, should I be concerned about compliance? Who am I reaching? Who am I not reaching? And remember that the key from the ADA, the key to ADA applicability is whether your customer has to access a physical place in order to avail themselves of your services. So for example, in consulting services, in agency relationships like insurance or other services where they're not connected to a physical place, then the ADA doesn't apply to that. However, to the extent you want to provide a service for all or maximize the potential audience, then these issues should probably concern you. The other thing is that web technologies, and there are a tremendous number of websites that point these out or that make these available. Kara commented earlier that there are quite a number of websites, and so those are accessible for those who want to be aware of this. Those tools are there to allow you to reach a wider audience and to communicate with the widest possible number of potential customers. Caesar and I are both open for questions. I presume we have some time for questions. If anyone has a question.
There was a question from Dale for Caesar. How effective are most web hosting platforms at addressing these accessibility issues?
It's gotten a lot better, Dale. I know I started doing some 508 compliance and stuff back in the early 2000s. And basically everything that you had there was custom writing and custom scripting and custom programming. But as some of the posts that I see in the chat, there's tons of plugins, there's tons of tools, and a lot of the systems nowadays come with parameters to input extra metadata and provide content in multiple formats. So that's all good. Really, the challenge comes down to Not everyone that's putting together a website understands how to properly connect all that stuff out. So that's part one. Part two is the complexity of the website. Websites in general are pretty easy, specifically marketing websites. But when you start getting into complicated websites that have operations and business and transactions and a lot of forms and things that you're doing heavy lifting operations behind the scenes, those websites are just it's harder. It gets harder and harder. And then the last aspect, imagine when you're building custom applications, it just gets to the next level. So for websites, I think it's pretty good, especially compared to when I started, which is nice.
Caesar,
I'll
Dale
add-
mentioned web hosting platforms, but the onus is actually on the website owner or creator, correct?
That's
That is
correct.
correct.
Not
That's
the
correct.
hosting company.
No, it has nothing to do with the
No.
hosting company. Some hosting companies can combine, like they're providers of not only the platform that you're using to execute your website, such as WordPress. There are some deals where you get you get the WordPress plus the hosting, and it's kind of like a package deal, but it's never on the hosting side. It's always on the owner and the people that are managing the website. Good clarification, Will. Thanks.
The one other point to add is that on the relationship between the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and the ADA, it's the same as the relationship between OSHA and ISO 9000. That is that conformity to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is no defense to an action under the ADA, to an enforcement action or to a lawsuit under the ADA. It may, if you conform to those guidelines, it may get you to a place where you're going to avoid complaints. But if a complaint comes, it's not a defense to a lawsuit. And that relationship is a general matter of law on the relationship between consensual standards on the one hand and legal requirements on the other. So there is that relationship. However, conformity with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines may be seen as a very desirable thing. In other words, you want to tout that, and so the companies that are ISO 9000 or one of those series of standards compliant, they don't hesitate to make that a point in advertising.
One comment from Deb Bocamper, very helpful for my clients. This is a great resource, so appreciate you guys doing that. Thad James said, will these, oh, it just moved up. Will these compliance suggestions eventually become rules/laws in the future?
I can see that happening. And because generally what happens is the way the law develops is through legislative investigations, legislative committee investigations, but industry publications and industry consortia and conventions like this are generally ahead of legislative developments, and they furnish material for consideration in legislative developments. That's exactly the way it happened in OSHA, so that industry guidelines and industry developments eventually made their way into regulations for accessibility, and so I can see that happening, definitely.
One extra point is I've had clients that are international, and there are different regulation bodies and rules that you have to follow in different countries. So the European Union and certain European countries actually have more progressive, advanced regulations and compliance than the United States. So if you're in an international business, you might have conflicting, well, what rules do I abide by? Well, you have to abide by the most progressive ones. So some of these international companies that have a lot of business in Europe, they're having to follow ADA compliance stuff that is not necessarily a rule here in the United States. So it's just a matter of time till it catches up.
If you look at any electronic device and you see that little label at the bottom, and you see the CE and you see all those other little, those are a type of trademark. Those are compliance marks, and when people are compliant, they want to make it known.
So we're about out of time, but Andy did want to know if technically challenged was considered a disability.
Just for Andy.
Just for Andy. All right.
It
Thank you,
is
guys.
interesting that, you know, if you go to just one quick example is in browsers, say for example Google Chrome, if you go to the three little dots in the upper right hand corner and you pull that menu down and it's more, you will eventually, picking through menus and submenus, you will eventually get to accessibility features. But it's a long way from the first page, from the home page. And so that's what this is all about. People with those disabilities would never be able to make it through those menus to get to the accessibility choices.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
Caesar and Bill, I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today on, for me, I can speak personally, hope I probably the audience too, but wow, what a very enlightening and important, you know, topic that you shared with us in respect to websites. So I found it very interesting and really very important. And for our audience too, I wanted to mention, if you're wondering, because this is, you know, a great presentation and I know I'm going to want to revisit again, that we do record our presentations throughout our program, and those will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And so later in the presentation, I'm sure our webmaster will put the link in the chat box so that all of you can subscribe to the e4e YouTube channel, because you not only see the presentations that you're viewing today, but you'll also see our past presentations, which we have a wonderful, wonderful library of expertise from the e4e organization. So be sure, if you haven't already done so, to subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, next up on our agenda is our Grow Showcase, where we'll be receiving today information and tips on how we can grow our personal businesses. Our presenter today is my absolute favorite balloon guy, Mr. Thad James. So his title of his presentation, I'm thinking he's really going to dig down and show, you know, profile some great information for us. But you know, I just can't help when I see Thad. He does such wonderful balloon creations within his business. So Thad, with that, I'm going to take it away. Go ahead and give it over to you.
Well, Glenda, thank you very much. I'm going to share the screen. Wow. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's nice that I'm your favorite balloon person of all the balloon people that you know. But yes, we're going to talk about the impact, influence, and importance of using social media platforms. It's important to understand the techniques of using social media platforms, knowing how to post, what to post, when to post. But the real impact is the effect your shared information has on your audience. Knowing all the technical aspects behind the platforms is one thing, but knowing what the impact is on your customers is the reason you're doing this, the reason you're using social media platforms. Now, social media is an important part of an overall marketing plan. It's not the sole marketing techniques that you need. And especially as part of your business, as you well know, there's sales, there's a business plan, there's accounting and bookkeeping and taxes and regulations and all sorts of stuff that go on in your business. But in your marketing plan, you really need to analyze your client base, do market research, find out what the industry trends are, understand if you're B2B or B2C. Doing competitive analysis is huge to understand where you fit within your industry. Now, social media platforms are very important, and I'm going to get into exactly what the importance of those are. That's not to say that you have to like what you're doing. And this is my attitude toward social media. Whereas I'm one of the leaders in my industry and in my market with social media, you won't find too many people that do what I do as a business that promote themselves as much in social media. I've done a lot of research in it. I've worked with an expert in the field. But that being said, there's a lot of my businesses that I didn't get into business to do. I didn't get into business to be a marketer or to do social media. So I suggest you find an expert in marketing or branding and web design and content management and graphics and in your social media production. Find somebody that can help you and guide you into the best uses of social media. And that being said, you know how important social media is because you probably have an account or 2 or 3. Now, typically, if we were at the business lodge, I would have you raise your hands, but I'm going to have you virtually in your mind raise your hands. Who has an account with the following social media platforms? Facebook. Most of us have Facebook accounts, either personal or business, or both. You're scrolling through and finding out what your cousins are doing and what's going on with your friends. LinkedIn is very important for business relationships. It's got millions of users, and you're probably closely connected to somebody that you need to be more closely connected to right now. LinkedIn is a great way to make that connection. YouTube, a YouTube account is important because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, next to Google. Google's first, YouTube is second. They're both owned by Google. So people are going to YouTube to find stuff and find information and find products. Instagram, great for pictures and videos and keeping up on what's going on, what's hot and what's now. If you have an Instagram account, then you're not on the bleeding edge, but you're on the cutting edge. What about WeChat, Messenger, Twitter, TikTok? How about all these others? These are all social media platforms that you could be on right now. I don't suggest that because this is overwhelming. You need to market to your target audience and know where they are. You need to know where your audience is living. You need to know where your potential clients and current clients are looking at, what they are looking at. They are not looking at all of these. I can guarantee you that right now. But they may be on some of these platforms that you need to be involved with. You need to be posting to these and engaging with these social media platforms. Now, the demographics of the social media platforms are all different. They all have a specific niche that they've carved out for themselves. Some are geared toward very young users. Some are geared towards really cutting edge technology. Some are just for silly videos. But all of these can be used for business to reach their audience. But you have to know what the platforms are doing and how to use them, because you can't go out there and sell on all of these platforms, because sometimes it just won't work. The users will not engage with people that are just selling. Excuse me. So you need to understand the demographics of the actual platforms in order to know how to use them for your benefit. Now, when posting on social media platforms, consistency is the key, because you need to know how long you're posting or how long your message is going to last on those social media platforms. As you can see here, a tweet on Twitter has a lifespan of about 15 minutes, unless it gets shared and promoted and commented on. Then it can last for almost a day. Whereas when you go down to YouTube, it can be hot for several days, but if it gets shared and liked and people comment on it, then it gets promoted and it can double and triple its lifespan. Plus on YouTube, people will search for the keywords that you use to describe that video. So YouTube videos can have a much longer life than a lot of other postings. Facebook, again, one of the top used platforms. The lifespan of a post is very short and has very limited reach unless it's boosted, unless it is advertised. We'll get into that in a little bit. But when you're using these platforms and you're finding out how long they last and everything, you need to know what you can post. What should you be posting on your business page? Not your personal page, but on your business page, what should you be posting and what should you avoid posting? Making a mistake on your business page postings can be huge and detrimental to your reputation. So there's some certain things you shouldn't be posting. Of course, these you'd think are common sense, but you'd be surprised if you go through the postings on different social media platforms. There are businesses that make bad comments or say bad things that are detrimental to their reputation. And you'd think it wouldn't happen, but it happens all the time. Here are some postings that went out that weren't really good. Here, Sears tried to get sales for victims of Hurricane Sandy. It didn't go over real well because they were being very glib about a phenomenon that killed hundreds of people and ruined the lives of thousands. And they were just trying to get some sales out of it. And then here you have a registered nurse who listed her company, listed her hospital when she was on an overnight shift, and was hoping that someone would go into code so she could stay busy and awake. Not good to list all that information that you have your employer on there, and I don't know if she kept her job too long. And you got to be careful when what you post out there, because here's a person that posted about the job they were starting. They weren't really happy about starting this job, but they just took it. Well, their boss saw the posting and fired them on the spot because they made bad comments about the job. So not something you want to really post out there. You got to be careful because social media is public. If you won't go on your porch and scream it to your neighborhood, probably shouldn't be putting it on the social media. So now we've got some things that we shouldn't be posting. The biggest question about social media is, what should I be posting? I mean, I don't know what people want to know about and what's going on. Well, here are some things that are really good to post depending on the type of business that you have. How about before and after pictures? I'm sure that Richard Terry could use something like this very quickly. It's nice. People want to see the before and after of the type of work that you do. And that can be anything from kitchens and baths to paints, if you're painting a house, or even a website. If you get permission from your clients to show the before and after of your work, the visual is very good to show people. Other things, how about the inner workings of your office? You can do bios of your employers. You can do employee of the month. Meet the new hire. You can do the latest technologies and the new product that you buy, or the new vehicle that you just purchased. You can also talk about industry articles that are of interest to people, because people are interested in your industry if they're looking at your stuff. Trade shows that you might be exhibiting in. Do a Q&A article or inspirational quotes. Behind the scenes of what goes on in your business that people don't always see. A joke or cartoon of the day, as long as it's an appropriate joke and isn't too off color, it can be very funny. Do surveys of your customers and clients. Ask them their opinions. Do a survey of what's the best thing. Do you like pink or do you like blue? What's your favorite movie? It doesn't have to always relate directly to your business, but it can just offer some interaction with your potential customers. And if you don't know what to post, ask your friends and clients, what do they want to know about your business and your industry? those answers that they give you or the questions that they have will turn into social media posts that you can then promote yourself as being an expert. Now, once you start posting on the social media platforms, you want to build an audience. You want to have people engage in your messages and on your platforms. And there's an easy way to do that. Start by following your customers, follow your clients, follow your vendors and suppliers. Find out the platforms that they're on, because they'll probably have them listed on their website, and follow them. Then make comments about their postings. And when somebody makes a comment about one of your postings, react to that post. Say thank you, or I appreciate that, or yes, that was a fun job. That builds the interaction between you and your audience. And then people will see that you're interacting with the audience, and that will increase your brand in their minds. Invite all these people to follow you on all of your social media platforms. List your social media platforms wherever you can, on your websites, in your blogs, on your email signatures, so that every time you send out an email, you have your name, your company name, your website, your phone number, and the icons for your social media platforms. And if you don't know how to put the icons on your signature and your email, because I didn't know how to, Google it. It's very simple to do, and there's lots of people who will give you very step-by-step instructions on how to put Facebook and Instagram icons on your email signatures, and it's really cool. You can also buy targeted ads. Now, targeted ads on Google and Facebook and Instagram can be very inexpensive. You're talking $5, $10, $20, and that can go over for a day or a week. And those can be targeted, curtail the demographics to a very specific audience, the exact audience you want to see that advertisement. And it's very inexpensive, and it gets to a targeted audience. You only pay for views, and there's also pay per click. Some great way to get your message out there further in those social media platforms, so you can become an expert in that social media platform. Now, talking about all this, I need to let you know that I do post every day on multiple platforms. And every time I do this, two things come to mind. One, the cranky baby face. And two, thank you to my social media expert who set me up on this. I won't plug Karen Fox's name because I don't think that's right. And I won't tell you how much she's helped me in all my social media aspects, and I wouldn't be successful without her, because this is not a commercial for Karen Fox, Karen the Connector at KarenTheConnector.com. That's not proper. What is proper is to let you know my social media calendar. I have a calendar that I set up, and it has changed over the years depending on what kind of postings are attractive to my clients and my audience. On Mondays or Sundays, I do a sculpture photo. Now, I've been doing balloons for 22 years, so I've got hundreds of pictures of different sculptures, so I don't know that I'll ever run out, which is nice. But I post a sculpture and tell a little story about what the sculpture is, or what it means, or why it was made. On Monday, I promote a business. I promote businesses from my Chamber of Commerce. I promote businesses from e4e. I promote businesses that I have done business with, client businesses. And I tell a little story about them or what they do, and it's just a little blurb that I put out every Monday. Tuesdays are a view from my office. This is always a kid with a balloon. People love kids, and people love the balloons, and people love the reactions of the kids with the balloons. So when I'm making balloons, I will ask permission of the kid and the parent if I can take your picture. I will be posting this on Facebook without using anybody's name. I don't use locations. There's no information about what this is, except that it's a picture of a kid with a balloon. And I get to use those to promote my fun with the kids. On Wednesdays, I'll promote upcoming events that I'm going to be doing, so it promotes the event and my services. Thursdays are Throwback Thursday. It's a hashtag that's very popular on Twitter and Facebook. It's hashtag TBT, and I do older pictures. I do pictures of older work that I've done. This shows people, one, my progression in my skill set, and two, that I've been doing this for a very long time. I will make mention that these pictures are from 2012 or 2006. That lets my audience know that I've been doing this for a very long time. And I've got great experience and knowledge in my industry. Yes, it's a fun picture of a cute little caterpillar, but this is from, I think, 2002. And this balloon shape of this caterpillar head had just come out. And I was one of the first people to use it from the manufacturer. I promote that so that people know that I have industry knowledge. So not only is it a cute picture, but I get to show off my history and my experience. Fridays, I promote a fellow balloon artist from around the country and around the world. I know a lot of balloon artists. I've been able to get to know them over the years. And so I will promote them to show my audience that I have industry knowledge, that I know the rich and famous people. That builds my credibility in their minds. It also gets to show off some really cool balloon artists, but it tells my audience the experience and that I have working with other balloon artists. Saturday are decor pictures, some of my bigger projects. So I get to show off some really cool stuff and gets to talk about these wonderful projects. So this is my schedule throughout the week. Now, these things can change. These postings can change, but it also still allows me to do live postings. If I'm at an event, I like to post a little video about, hey, Sammy J here at the such and such concert, and we're making balloons, and we'll do a little Facebook thing because my social media person told me that doing Facebook Live videos helps build an audience. Do I want to do this stuff? No, I'm busy setting up and getting prepared to work. But it helps build my audience. It helps build my brand. It helps get my message out to the people that are following me on these social media platforms. So it works out very well. Now, this schedule that I have, which I worked out with the unnamed source to be named later, I worked with her to come up with a platform to schedule these social media posts. And there are lots of different social media schedulers out there. And you can do one of two things. You can spend hours, days, and weeks studying these different platforms, look at their advantages and disadvantages. You can create a detailed spreadsheet, and then you can use each program for 2 to 3 weeks to see how it works and how it reaches the audience and how it posts and what platforms does it work with. Or you can contact a social media expert to come up with a plan much quicker. It's up to you. It doesn't matter. But I would suggest not going through all of these platforms to find out which one works for you, because some are better than others. Some are more expensive than others. Some have features that you may or may not need. You need to find out the features that you need to work with, because paying for features that you're not using is a waste of time and money. The impact that social media campaigns can have is huge. Because almost everybody is on at least 2 or 3 social media platforms, your message can get to their eyes very quickly and very effectively. The social media platform or messages will humanize your brand, and it'll get you in front of your target audiences, because you can customize your message to fit what they're looking for. You'll gain credibility and generate loyalty. You can build super fans, people that will always comment on your posts, like your posts, and share your posts to their audience. So they will help you spread the message that you're putting out there. Also, you can gauge customer feedback and their interests. If you're putting out a type of post every week, like the history of my business, and nobody's looking at it, you can stop doing that and replace that with a different type of post. Hairstyles of the rich and famous. And if people are engaging with that and liking that, and it's building your brand, then that's what you can push and promote even more. The importance of social media to my business is that I don't own a blimp or a sports stadium, and I don't know any famous celebrities. So that's not going to help me promote my business. I would love to have a blimp flying over sporting events if they ever come back with my name on it. Maybe that would build my brand. But social media gives me access to my client industries. My clients belong to certain groups on Facebook and LinkedIn. I join those groups so I can communicate with them on their level. Social media allows me to stand out from my competition. I have a schedule of posts that I put out every week. I am consistent with those messages. I don't just post here and there sporadically. I'm out on those platforms every week. I get to build a base of fans that want to share my content with their friends. Hey, I know this really cool balloon guy. Here's the type of stuff that he does. You have fans. Your clients are fans of yours already. Turn them into super fans by having them share your content so they can say, hey, I know a really cool person. The key factors to remember with any social media postings: consistency. You've got to be consistent in your message and in your posting schedule. You need to adjust your content to fit what your audience is caring about. Keep up with your calendar. Always respond to comments. That way you can interact with your audience. And advertise sporadically. Promote and boost the posts that are doing well to capture more audience than you do just organically with your postings. With a proper social media calendar and proper postings, you will excel in your industry, and you will build an audience of clients and fans that will continue to build and grow your business. That's all I have for now. I don't know if any questions came up. I was not watching.
Thanks, Dad. We've only got about a minute or so left.
That's fine.
Tom threw you a great question that I don't know if there's an answer to. How do you measure social media ROI? And John Ayers would like to know, how much time per day do you spend on your posting efforts?
Oh, cool, great. ROI, I use a lot of different algorithms. My scheduler is called Buffer. Buffer has in it analytics that shows the interactions with each of my postings on each of my platforms. So I can gauge the reaction, the interactions with that. As far as direct ROI, like how much money am I making from promoting myself, it's nebulous, as with all marketing. As far as I'm concerned, marketing is very difficult to gauge the direct in the bank reactions. I don't know. I will get, more than occasionally, I will get messages of, hey, I saw your posting on Facebook. Can you make something for my event? Unless you're directly asking people to come to you based on these postings, it is much like putting up a billboard or a yard sign or just wearing a shirt with your name on it, it's hard to gauge what the direct ROI is. It really, it's not as much tangible as you might like. As far as how much time do I spend, about 2 hours per week. And I can post, right now I've got scheduled out through mid-September. I schedule out my posts weeks and weeks in advance, because if something comes up that I want to promote immediately, I can insert that into my scheduler, or I can post it live on one of the platforms, whichever platforms it works best on. Like I said, I do Facebook videos at my events, and it works very quickly. So it takes very little time to build these posts and schedule them.
Thank you, Thad. Appreciate it. All yours, Glenda.
Thank you, Thad, for sharing your tips on utilizing social media. I promise I was paying attention, listening to your content and great tips, but I'm so excited that you also shared within your slides some of your absolutely beautiful balloon creations. So now the audience, if they haven't, been in your space, understand now why I said you're absolutely my favorite balloon guy, and you just produce such wonderful, beautiful creations. So thank you very much. And I love how you were humble, but we at E4E, we do promote each other. We do have wonderful expertise to offer the community. So I loved how you also shared, that your person is Karen Fox, and she definitely has got some wonderful insight and expertise. So anybody that's looking for, upping their presence on social media, absolutely, Karen Fox would be an absolute wonderful resource to reach out to. All right. Next in our agenda is our Live Showcase. So we at E4E, not only is it important to us to learn how to run our business more effectively and grow our businesses, we also can understand, and we understand the importance of, living a quality life. And so oftentimes you'll see within our programming, we provide, tips or information about how can we, at least put some kind of balance into our lives. Work is definitely what fuels us, but having a balanced life is really important, and living a good life along the way. So our facilitator, our presenter today for our Live Showcase is Mrs. Ann Purnett, and I think she's got a panel of experts to help her in with her presentation today. So Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Glenda. I appreciate that, and I do have a panel of experts. Our title today for this segment is Gaining Control Without Being Controlling, a few dashes and then delegate, which is code for you can't do all the work yourself, even though you may think you can. So we've really chosen this topic because the decision to entrust work to others, coupled with then the transition to getting that work done through those resources, is often the barrier for people being successful in growing and managing their businesses effectively. So it's important to think about what you do well, focus on what you do well, and then find those resources that you can count on to do all the other things that have to be done. An example would be what Thad talked about in terms of using Karen Fox and her expertise. Nobody has expertise in everything. So finding those people who can do things for you is really key to growing and being successful and not being really crazy along the way. So today we're going to hear from 3 successful business owners, each who have taken that plunge, but in different ways. They each have a slightly different business model, which helps them get things done, to make the commitments to their clients. And first, we're going to hear from Richard Terry, who's the owner of Accolade Kitchen and Bath, who's going to share why he's chosen the business model of working through contractors as opposed to hiring craftspeople on his payroll, and how it is he vets those resources. So Richard, if you are ready, take it away.
All right, thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. In my former life, I had a swimming pool maintenance and construction company in Key Largo, Florida for 28 years. I had 18 employees. We serviced 450 pools a week and built about 30 pools a year. So I had plenty of expertise with dealing with employees, et cetera. And when I sold my business and moved up to St. Louis, I also commuted for 11 years back and forth to Key Largo. So when I started my remodeling company here, I realized that I didn't want to get that big. And I realized the headaches of having employees, that's good and bad, I'm not saying, but you have to do that. So dealing with subcontractors was a way to go. First of all, starting a new business, it was less expensive than trying to, come up with payroll every week or every other week. So when I started Accolade Kitchen and Bath, I worked for another kitchen and bath company just to kind of learn the business. And through one, I was just a salesperson. And through one of the jobs kitchens that we sold, I met a guy who was an installer, and this gentleman who hired me to design their kitchen was a good friend of mine, and he hired the independent contractor himself. So I was able to see his work firsthand, and that gave me the idea that when I had enough knowledge on my own to go out and go out on my own, to hire subcontractors and to hire installers. So I do, as far as vetting them, it's kind of a step-by-step process. There's places to go. I look at their references. I can go to the Better Business Bureau. I also look at their work, and I also critique the work as well, because there's things that I like to be done. I'm kind of a perfectionist too. So when they don't do something correctly, I say, hey, what about this over here? Can you do this or can you do that? So that's how I do it, and it just has worked for me. I've just starting my 13th year in this business, and real happy to still be here and still working. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So step one in the process is certainly knowing what you can do well and figuring out ways to use those resources effectively and give them feedback. So second, we're going to hear from Lori St. Clair, who's the owner of On Target for Profitable Growth, who will share with us when it became really clear to her that she needed to have resources to help her meet her client needs. And the business model that she has chosen is to employ these individuals. So we'll learn a little different model and a little bit from Lori St. Clair this morning. Lori, please take it away.
Thank you, Anne. So for me, when I got to the point, it was about 4 years into my business, that I found I had really underestimated the time it was taking me for running the business. I did not plan that for that time. When I was putting together my business model up front, I fully looked at, the number of hours I could work on client files and get the job done. I did not put in the amount of time or enough amount of time for networking, building relationships, planning for my business, doing my own books, and things of that nature. So when it really came down to it, as I continued to grow and add staff or add clients, I found that I was spending a lot of time doing a lot of clerical type of things initially that prevented me from having enough time to get the work done. Now, I will say I made the mistake that many small businesses that are looking to make that decision to expand and either outsource or hire, in that I waited too long. I was so overwhelmed and working gobs and gobs of hours, way more than I ever should have been, that it made that transition even more difficult because I did not have enough time to train properly. So it was a difficult transition there at the beginning, and I learned greatly from that. But so it really, at that point, I knew I needed someone to bring in and help. And so I started with a part-time clerical type person who could scan and file documents for me and take that part off. And that allowed me to go out and build more relationships and gain more business. And very soon after, I found that it was apparent I needed more bookkeepers. I needed someone who could do the bookkeeping, similar to I could to get the work done. And so when it came to that point and I was growing, I realized I felt for my business, it was better for me to hire employees because I really wanted office space where my clients could come and meet with me. They could drop off documentation if they needed to. We could do trainings in that office because a lot of the businesses I work with are small. Many were home-based, and it gave us an opportunity to get together. And with that, it made more sense for me to hire employees because I really wanted a close team environment where we're working side by side, hand in hand. I didn't want it segregated to where this person only had these particular clients and the next employee only had these particular clients. I wanted it to be a group effort so that we had crossover, workload balancing, and a true team environment. Not to say that you can't accomplish that with outsourced providers. It certainly can be done. But my vision at the time, and still today, would be more to hire employees where I'm doing more of the training and what our processes are versus just hiring out the expertise and letting them do it as they wish. So for me, going with employees was definitely the best way to go. And like Richard said, it does come with its own headaches at times with working with employees and the different things that can come up. But I feel as though you still have some of that with your subcontractors. It's just in a little bit different manner. So for me, the employee route is definitely the way to go.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that very much. And finally, we're going to hear from Will Hankey, who's the owner of Red Canoe Media. And Will has one employee, Amber. And about 3 years ago, he made the decision to use contractors that he found through using an app. And for those of you who know Will, you know he's the app man. So we're going to learn from Will about how he made that decision, the kind of impact that the decision to use those resources has had on his business, and how he ensures quality. So that's multiple questions, Will, but please take it away.
Too many questions. No. Thank you, Ann. Yeah, I was a lot like Lori, where there were a lot of things happening at once, and I was struggling to keep up. And you know, you can, when you're starting a business, you can do a lot of things yourself, and you can wear a lot of hats. But there becomes a point when you have to either be complacent and happy wearing those multiple hats and limit your overall revenue, or realize that you want to grow big and you need other resources. So I realized two things, and that was I wanted my business to grow big, and I didn't want to be the bottleneck, which I was. So I think that was a huge turning point for me in all these years of being frustrated. And you know, customers kept coming, things kept happening, projects kept going, and I just couldn't keep up with it. So after pulling my hair out for quite a few years, I decided to use a service called e4e, which is much like you expect. It's free up some of your time. And I hired a person just for a couple hours a week, and just started having them take some of the repeatable tasks off of my plate. That really started to help my business grow, because now I could focus a little bit more on maybe on the technical stuff and not so much on the repeatable things. So hiring that person changed a lot for me. Obviously, like I said, I didn't have to hire somebody full time. I could limit their hours so I can keep my budget totally under control and know that it would never go over a certain amount of time or spend. And I could always shut it off, which is a real nice way to have that. If there's a week where no revenue's coming in and you need to kind of slow things down, and then you can ramp up once some checks hit the mailbox or something like that, you can control that, which was really a nice option as well. There are a couple other free tools, or not free tools, but ways to find people besides e4e. There is Fiverr, which is fairly popular. I'll put the link in the chat for that. And there's also Upwork, upwork.com, which is where you can find experts in all kinds of fields to do all kinds of things for you. And some of that is contract work, so one-time project type work, or ongoing. So there's a couple different ways to go about finding people online. I particularly specifically picked people that were overseas for a couple reasons. First of all, cheaper labor. Their cost of living is a lot lower, so their per hour seems to be lower, but their quality is just fantastic, which is great. And I also like the idea of things getting done while I was sleeping. So I'd wake up the next morning and things were done that I needed done overnight. That was very appealing to me, which seemed to work out very well. The other big thing is we worked on building systems, because I didn't want to just tell this person to go do something. I mentioned earlier, repeatable tasks. So we started documenting everything. Bill Purnett turned me on to Work the System, which is an absolutely fantastic book. Really changed everything that we did. And then even training Amber. When Amber came on, it was, okay, Amber, open up Word and type everything that I tell you to do so that we have it documented. There's also a book called Clockwork that's similar to Work the System, but both of those are fantastic for kind of starting to get your systems in place. And once I had the systems in place, the simplicity of assigning somebody to do something was pretty easy, which made it very easy. And then what I did was I just started repeating that across multiple jobs. So I brought on an SEO person. I brought on a WordPress person. I brought on a link building person. And when those jobs come in, I can assign those people to do those jobs, and it's just it works a lot better. The other big thing is, at one point, I realized I had all this in place, and I woke up and I gave myself permission really to be in the business development role, which is something I was always doing, but doing that along with 10 other things at the same time. So really now, as jobs come in, I'm able to start putting them, the people in place, assigning the jobs and getting them done. And I can keep my focus purely on developing additional clients, additional customers. And excuse me, lastly, it also made me feel okay with delegating tasks to others, which I think was a big deal for any business owner, to get over that thing that, or they're not going to do it great. Well, if your systems are in place and they're documented correctly, they can't screw it up. And if they screw it up, then they didn't follow your system, most likely. So, Ann, did I answer all your questions?
You did indeed, Will. Thank you very much. And Lori has one more point that she'd like to make. So before I do a little summary, we're going to go back to Lori.
Thank you. So one of the things that came to mind, especially as I was listening to Will, because I think he and I had a very, very similar situation as far as how we realized and moved forward, is sometimes it's really difficult to see for yourself how you can let go. And I documented a lot of things as well, but just wanted to let everyone know that there are people out there who can help you really kind of evaluate and let go. So that was something I really struggled with. And I actually worked with Kathy Sexton. She met with me, and every time I kind of hit a roadblock of, I just can't get rid of that. I can't let someone else do it. She would really help me work through, why not? Why do you have to be the one? Why couldn't someone else? How could you make that happen? How can you still be on top of it and know what's going on and know the status, but not be the one doing it? So I did just want to make that additional comment that sometimes it helps to meet with a peer, meet with someone you trust, and maybe a peer board, or just, meet up with someone that and a fellow business owner, and really kind of talk through it. Because even sometimes as I would just say it out loud, I would be like, oh, that was just dumb. I can let go of that. But without saying it and having that conversation out loud and having someone else's perspective, sometimes it's really difficult to see what you can let go of and what you can train and delegate to others. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's exactly the point. That transition, making the decision and then executing on that decision to trust others, is huge. And there's a lot to it. It's not that it's a simple process, but it's an important process. So by focusing on what you do well, while using resources who are focused on what they do well, you're gaining control without being controlling by delegating. Say that 3 times fast. So we hope that by hearing from successful business people who've made the transition from doing the work themselves to getting the work done through others, you'll be inspired to work to not fly alone. And I think maybe there's a few minutes for some questions. Do we have time for that, Will, or do we need to wait until a little bit later?
We got 4 minutes.
Okay, so I'm not sure if there were some things popping up, but I was not focused on that. So I don't know what we have.
Well, I have to scroll back and look as well. There are a couple people talking about OneNote. Look like maybe that was Brian and Andy. They're using a service called OneNote. Is that a Microsoft service, I think? Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, Andy was the other. I did put a couple links to things that we're doing. Somebody also said, great comment from Will, you'll have to grow your staff unless you decide to keep your operations small enough to do everything yourself. 100% agree. My window's not real big, so I can't tell who's saying things. One can do many things in business. The question is, should you be doing those things? Any thoughts on virtual assistants? So that was what I did. That was a question from Andy. That is what I did. I hired VAs to do probably about 85, 90% of our work now. And there are virtual assistants. There's somebody that does it for e4e that's located here in the US. So it's not an overseas thing only.
If I might add a comment, whether you're using vendors like Richard is, or whether you're using employees, hiring employees, I think one of the keys to determining with whom you want to work is making sure that there's an alignment of values. Do they share your values of excellence, of quality, of responsibility, of openness? You know, because we can always teach skills. We can't teach values and we can't teach desire. So when I was coaching clients on bringing on new staff members or bringing on a new vendor, those were the things I counseled them to pay attention to in that process.
Thank you, Dale. That's absolutely key. I couldn't agree more.
There was a note from Kara, a note about VAs. Sometimes you have to kiss a few frogs to find your prince. Once you find the prince, hold on. That's huge. Once you find somebody, make sure that they're rewarded. Random bonuses to people overseas, and I'm talking 25, 50 bucks goes a long way for those VAs. So yeah, hold on to those people and make sure that they realize how loyal they are, or continue to encourage their loyalty.
So I thank our panelists, and Glenda, I think I need to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Really awesome, interesting and timely topic for business owners. And really nice job on your part too, Anne, of assembling some really good panelists, really great insight and diverse views, you know, for all of us to think about, you know, what will work the best for us. So really nice job. I so love the e4e community, such a go-giver mentality and everyone wanting to jump on. And I'm sure there's others too that ideas and thoughts were popping into their heads about resources that they use that they'd like to share. And so that's my segue into turning it over to you, Bill, the leader of e4e, because I warned him, Bill, that you were going to be asking them about some takeaways from today's programming. So I'm going to turn it over back to you, Bill, now.
Thanks, Glenda. Great webinar today, everybody. And I want to let everybody know how much we appreciate you investing your time with us today. So one of the things that we truly do believe, is that sometimes we invest our time like this, but nothing really changes as a result of it. So what we recommend is that when you attend a webinar of ours, that you pick 3 things that come out of the webinar that you actually intend to change and implement. So Will, I didn't know if anything came out of that, if you got any feedback for us that people wanted to share. Any ideas?
Nothing coming in yet, but I'm sure they will in the next couple minutes here.
Okay, great. So can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you all, are you kind of coping with the uncertainty of what's going on? Is that something that is making your life a little bit more difficult? So one of the things that I have learned over the years is that uncertainty isn't something that works well for us. We're hardwired, unfortunately, to live in fear and worry when we get into uncertainty. And so over the years, this is a time-tested tool that I wanted to share. Anyone who wants this, please just send me an email and I'll be glad to give it to you. But it's not unusual that when we get a problem, that what we're going to do is we're going to want to protest what's going on. You know, we're going to be shocked, disbelief, denial. We're going to be angry. We're going to have negotiation, and we're going to ultimately get into withdrawal. So if that's where you're at, just be okay with the fact that you're not alone in this. It's not unusual that we get into this frame of mind. So whatever you do, don't go it alone. The e4e partners would be more than happy to help you if you're struggling in that situation. But my experience has been that the real key to that then is to get to an area of acceptance, and that you are not in denial of what's going on, that you accept it, that you try to move towards optimism. And the key is that you get back into what I call take charge. So again, don't fly alone. Recognize that this is like a 30-year-old tool that I learned many years ago. It has served me well over the years, and I know it would serve you well if you feel like you're in some sort of transition and not really sure about how to cope with uncertainty. So Will, was there anything that you wanted to share with folks that people might have come up with?
Yeah, Brian said from Lori, you have to put in time up front when you bring on new personnel. Good point. Thad said, I appreciate the discussion of contractors versus employees. We'll definitely be outsourcing tasks and projects. So Thad, that's 2 hours a week you can get back, because I know that's what you said you were putting into your social media. Let's see. Richard Thierry said, small idea, ask clients to friend on Facebook, follow them, also add social media icons on your email signature. That's it, Bill.
Good deal. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone spending your quality time with us today. So Dale, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to do next month?
All right. If you will, Bill, unshare your screen.
You got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I need to share mine now and show the schedule for next month. If I can find it back. Here we go. So for next month, we've got Kara Gamber, who's going to do our marketing minute. She's going to give us tips for creating interesting and useful emails that convert. And I know I'm going to look forward to that one. Lori St. Clair is going to do a program on making contrasting styles work. She and I did a program a number of years ago, and our styles are dramatically different. And yet we've had the good fortune to work together in a number of different venues, and it's always been enjoyable for me, at least. So she's going to tell us about how that works. Will Hankey is going to start a new 3-part critical thinking series. He's going to be the lead-off speaker for that. And his topic is going to be permission to succeed, resetting your mind for super growth. And then yours truly is going to do a program for about Gaining Trust Instantly. And that's September 16th, next month. Hope you'll all join us there.
Okay, I think that's, for the most part, guys, that's a wrap. I could echo what Bill Purnett said. You know, we so appreciate you and showing up at today's meeting and being our audience, because it really wouldn't, really work all that well for us if we present this wonderful programming and people don't show up to take full advantage of it. So hopefully you did receive, one tip, one idea, one aha moment. Because the critical part is, putting into action. So good day to all of you. I hope you have enjoy the rest of your day and week. And hopefully, we will see you next month. And thank you, Dale. It looks really exciting what our lineup is, more and great content for us to share and learn and grow. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.